DeWitt Lacy, civil rights attorney. This is exactly in his wheelhouse. And in fact, in the last bit, we were talking a little bit about the Rodney King trial. And DeWitt, you have some personal experience with that case, don't you?
I do, by virtue of me working at the law offices of John Burris. John Burris, of course, being the attorney who led the civil rights action against the officers in the Rodney King matter.
Yeah, and tell us, they were just comparing this case to the Rodney King case. And I have seen some differences. My understanding is at the criminal trial in that case, the entire video was not shown to the jury. What are the differences that you see, and how do you think those differences will play out here?
I think the context of where the nation is very important. So right now, I think we're at a different point in time, right, where people are a lot more understandable to, I guess, the happening of police violence. And a lot of that's because of Rodney King. Had there not been a Rodney King, maybe there is no George Floyd, I guess, protest and or Derek Chauvin trial at all. So I think a lot of it comes on the backs of that. But also, it's the question of whether or not the force was necessary. And what we saw in the Rodney King was the continued beating of Mr. King when he obviously was not a threat. Here, you saw Chauvin and the other officers continue to kneel and apply pressure on his neck and his back when he was already restrained and handcuffed. Generally, officers may have a knee on the shoulders or across the shoulders so that they can apply the handcuffs. But here, Floyd was already handcuffed. So I think there's some problems for the prosecution in the same way that there are problems in the Rodney King as far as explaining.
Yeah, I think that you make a really good point, and especially to the point of our nation being in a different place. I had lunch with some friends this weekend, and one was a woman of color, and she was talking about how this case the Rodney King case had impacted her so much as a young teenager when that happened. And I couldn't help but think that there are people similar to her on this jury, people who saw that go down and perhaps want to make sure that we see something different here. This history of our nation is part of all of our DNA. How much does that play into the jury's consideration of this case?
I think it is huge. I think context is everything, right? None of this happens in a vacuum. I mean, we would like to believe that, but that's a legal fiction, right? Everybody has the experience of the world that they bring into the courtroom. That is what we call common sense. Unfortunately for the defense in this circumstance, the common sense includes the knowledge of instances like Rodney King or Trayvon Martin or Eric Gardner, and the names and lists go on, and that is brought into this courtroom. So yeah, I think you're right. Folks want to make sure they get this right and see that justice is brought. And as much as the defense, I do think is doing making a valiant effort. I think they have a tough row to hoe and a high hill to climb.